The Tylorians stared at the message they had just received, their hearts sinking as they processed the words. It was not the reply they had hoped for. General Amanda Bryce's cold, calculated tone echoed in their minds, each word sending a chill through their fragile hope. What they had believed was a sign of salvation had turned into something entirely different. Instead of offering help, humanity had chosen to see them as a resource to be harvested, a planet to be conquered. The Oxylorians had begged for mercy, for technology, for the chance to survive. What they had received in return was a declaration of war. General Bryce's voice, though calm, carried a harsh, almost indifferent authority. Your planet's resources are valuable. Tylorians, we have analyzed your distress signal and determined that your planet contains what we need to survive. We are sending a fleet to assist you, but it will be under our control. Your species will be taken into our protection. Your world will be ours. We will help you survive, but you will serve us in return. The message ended there, leaving the Oxylorians in stunned silence. They had expected a response, but not like this. They had never imagined that their desperate cry for help would lead to a violent, exploitative invasion. The humans, they had heard of them. Of course. The stories from their distant neighbors, the records of humanity's rise to power, their ability to conquer and expand across the stars. But they had also heard that humans were a compassionate species, willing to aid others in times of need. How had it all gone so wrong? As the reality of the situation set in, panic began to spread through the Tylorian capital. The once peaceful society, built on understanding and cooperation, now found itself at the brink of war. The Oxylorians had no army. They had no weapons that could stand against Earth's advanced fleet. What could they do? They had trusted the humans, but now they knew they would be fighting for their very survival. Kale, the leader of the Tylorians, paced anxiously in the command center. His mind raced, trying to come up with a plan, any plan that could save his people from what was coming. The message from General Bryce was clear. Earth was not here to help. They were here to take what they wanted. They would strip the planet of its energy, its resources, and leave the Tylorians as little more than slaves to their demands. The idea that humanity had the audacity to offer such a helpful solution felt like a slap in the face. The Oxylorians were not just a people in need. They were a people about to be wiped out. I don't understand, Kale murmured, looking at the faces of his council. They asked for nothing in return. Why would they do this? No one can say, said Lyra, his second in command, her voice filled with both confusion and anger. We thought they were a compassionate species, that they would answer our cries for help with kindness. Instead, they see our suffering as an opportunity, a chance to take what they want. We need to act quickly, said Darren, a strategist. If we wait too long, we won't have a chance. We must prepare to defend ourselves. Kale nodded, but the weight of the decision was heavy on him. What could they do? The humans had advanced technology that the Tylorians couldn't even begin to understand. The humans had ships, weapons, and soldiers that far surpassed anything they had. And yet, despite their obvious disadvantage, the Tylorians had no choice but to fight. If they didn't, their world would be lost, and their people would be enslaved. Prepare the defense systems, Kale ordered. We will not go down without a fight. We will show the humans that they cannot take us so easily. The Tylorian military, which had long been used for peaceful exploration and research, was now forced to adapt to the brutal realities of war. The soldiers, trained for diplomacy and peacekeeping, were now tasked with defending their homes, their families, and their very way of life. They had no experience with war, no experience with how to fight an enemy that had no mercy, no compassion. As the Tylorians scrambled to prepare for the oncoming invasion, they could only hope that their newfound resolve would be enough to stand against the might of Earth's military. But deep down, they knew the truth. No matter how hard they fought, they were outmatched, and the humans were coming for them, whether they were ready or not. Meanwhile, The humans were preparing for the invasion as well. General Bryce stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the vastness of space. She had made the decision to move forward with the invasion, and now there was no turning back. The Xylorians were an obstacle to Earth's future, a future that depended on their resources. In her mind, the destruction of the Tylorians was not an act of cruelty, it was an act of necessity. Earth was running out of resources, and the Tylorians had what they needed. If it meant taking their planet, exploiting their energy, and forcing them into submission, so be it. "We're almost there," said one of her officers, his voice cold and efficient. General Bryce nodded. "Prepare the fleet. Our objective is clear. We secure the heart of Xyloria and extract its energy. Make sure we show them how little mercy we have." As the fleet neared the Xylorian homeworld, General Bryce's thoughts were firm. This was a conquest, not a rescue. And while the Tylorians might scream for help, humanity would show them that their mercy was limited. There was no turning back from this decision. The humans had arrived, and they were coming for more than just help. They were coming for control. Back on Xyloria, Kale and his people could feel the tremors of the incoming human fleet. The battle for their survival was about to begin. But even as the first human ships entered orbit, the Xylorians refused to give in without a fight. The fate of their world would be decided in the coming hours, and they knew that nothing would be the same again. In the silence of space, the Xylorians steeled themselves for the war that was about to consume them. The humans had come, but they would not surrender without a struggle. The suspense was palpable, and the audience could feel the weight of the impending conflict as both sides braced for the inevitable clash. Would the Tylorians be able to defend their home, or would humanity's overwhelming power crush their resistance? Only time would tell. The humans had arrived. As the massive fleet of Earth's ships approached the orbit of Tyloria, the tension in the Xylorian command center reached a fever pitch. Kale and his council stood in the center of the room, looking at the holographic map of their planet. The fleet of human warships was now visible in the skies, casting long shadows over the dying world below. It felt like a nightmare that had become their reality. "What are they waiting for?" Kale muttered, his eyes narrowed at the map. The humans had not launched an attack yet, but every second of silence felt like 1,000 hours. They had made their intentions clear in the transmission, yet they had not yet begun their assault. The Xylorians, in their desperation, could not afford to be caught off guard. They had to act, even if they were hopelessly outmatched. "We don't know," Kale, Lyra said, her voice strained. "They've been in orbit for several hours. Perhaps they're waiting for us to make the first move. Maybe they think we will surrender." Kale shook his head. "They won't give us a chance to surrender. They'll come down with full force. We need to take action now." He turned to Darren, who was standing next to the communications panel. "Have we managed to send out a message to the other species in the galaxy? We need help. If we don't stop the humans here, our world is lost." Darren hesitated before answering. "We sent out a distress call, but we've received no response yet. The humans have likely jammed most of our communications. We're isolated." The realization hit them all like a cold wave. They were completely alone. No reinforcements were coming. The Xylorians would have to face this battle on their own. The command center was filled with the sound of hurried footsteps as the Xylorians scrambled to finalize their defense plans. The Xylorian military had never been trained for this kind of fight. They had always been a peaceful species, focusing on knowledge and exploration, not combat. They had no real weapons that could compete with the power of Earth's fleet. Their only hope was to delay the invasion long enough to buy time for an unknown miracle to happen. Kale paced back and forth, trying to keep his calm. "We need to use the terrain to our advantage. Set up barriers, anything we can do to slow them down. And prepare for the worst. Once they land, we won't have a choice but to fight." The atmosphere in the command center was tense. The sound of boots on metal floors echoed as soldiers scrambled to take their positions. But no matter how many weapons they prepared, Kale knew it wasn't enough. Earth's technology was far beyond theirs, and the Tylorians had no hope of winning a direct confrontation. Kale, Lyra called out, her voice tight with worry. Do you think we can hold them off? He turned to her, a grim expression on his face. I don't know, Lyra, but we have no choice. If we surrender now, we lose everything. Our planet, our people, our way of life. Lyra nodded, her eyes full of resolve. Then we fight. The decision had been made. The Xylorians would stand and fight, even if they were certain to lose. They would show humanity that they were not a helpless species to be subjugated. If they were going to die, they would do it with pride. As the humans began their descent toward the planet's surface, Kale couldn't help but feel a deep sense of betrayal. They had trusted humanity. They had believed in the stories of compassion and kindness. Yet here they were, facing a ruthless invasion. Humanity's desire for resources had blinded them to the Xylorian suffering. Instead of helping them, the humans saw them as a stepping stone in their quest for dominance. Deploy the shields, Kale ordered, and get our fighters in the air. We need to hold them off for as long as we can. The Tylorians had developed a rudimentary fleet of fighters, designed for exploration and defense. But they were no match for the military might of the human forces. They would be outgunned and outnumbered, but they had no choice. They had to buy time. Outside, the first of the human ships began to break through the atmosphere, their massive forms casting dark shadows over the Tylorian cities below. The earth shook as they landed, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. The Xylorians watched in horror as the humans began their assault, deploying their ground troops and massive vehicles. The humans were here, and they were taking no prisoners. Their soldiers, clad in advanced armor, marched across the Tylorian landscape with the precision of a well-oiled machine. They were an unstoppable force. As they made their way through the streets, they encountered resistance from the Tylorian soldiers, but the fight was one-sided. The Xylorians' weapons were no match for the humans' advanced technology. Every shot fired by the Xylorian forces was met with a volley of laser fire or missiles from the humans, cutting down their fighters with ease. It was clear to the Xylorians that they were being overwhelmed, yet they refused to give up. They fought on with everything they had, not out of hope, but out of necessity. Kale watched as his people fought valiantly, knowing that they were facing an enemy they could not defeat. The humans had come for more than just resources. They had come to dominate, to enslave, to take everything. It was a hard truth to swallow. But Kale knew that the fate of his people was now in the hands of those who had come to destroy them. As the humans advanced, Kale and his remaining forces retreated to the last line of defense. The battle was far from over, but the Xylorians' chances of survival were slipping away with each passing minute. The Xylorians had screamed for help, but now they understood the cruel reality. Humanity's answer would be far more than they had bargained for. The suspense was unbearable as the final confrontation between the Tylorians and humanity loomed closer. Would Kale and his people be able to hold out long enough to find a solution? Or was this the beginning of the end for the Tylorians? The future was uncertain, and only time would tell if they could survive the onslaught, or if humanity's greed would consume them all. As the battle raged on, the air over Xyloria was thick with smoke and the sounds of destruction. The once beautiful, peaceful cities were now reduced to rubble, with shattered glass, crumbled buildings, and fires burning in every direction. The Tylorian resistance, though valiant, was no match for the overwhelming force of humanity's military. They fought with everything they had, but the enemy's advanced technology made every effort feel futile. Kale stood in the command center, watching as his planet fell apart around him. The holographic map in front of him showed their defenses crumbling. The humans were everywhere. As they neared the Heart's location, Kale could feel the weight of what they were about to face. They would be outnumbered, but they had no other choice. If the heart fell into human hands, all hope would be lost. Inside the heart's chamber, they found a group of Silurian engineers frantically working to activate the last line of defense, a shield that could block any human attempt to extract energy from the heart. The engineers had worked tirelessly to design it, but they knew it would only hold for so long. The humans were relentless, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. "The shield is nearly ready," one of the engineers said, his voice filled with both relief and fear. "But it's not perfect. We may only have a few minutes before the humans break through." Cale nodded grimly. They didn't have much time. The shield would buy them a few precious minutes, but it wouldn't be enough to stop the inevitable. If they couldn't defend the heart long enough for the shield to fully activate, the humans would get what they came for. Outside, the sound of human soldiers approaching grew louder. Cale looked to his team, his heart heavy. "We fight here. We protect the heart with our lives." As the first wave of human soldiers arrived at the entrance of the chamber, Cale and his group readied their weapons. The Silurians were not warriors, but they had one thing the humans didn't: unshakable determination. And for the first time since the battle began, Cale felt a glimmer of hope. They might not win, but they would make the humans pay for every moment of their suffering. The fate of Siluria was now in their hands. The doors to the heart's chamber burst open. The humans had arrived, and the final battle for the future of the Silurians was about to begin. The clash was immediate, brutal, and unrelenting. As the doors to the heart's chamber swung open, the Silurians stood firm, their weapons drawn and ready. They knew this was their final stand. Humanity's soldiers poured into the chamber, their footsteps heavy, their guns raised and aimed. The advanced armor of the humans gleamed under the dim lights, and their superior technology made them an imposing sight. But the Silurians stood resolute. They had nowhere to run, no way to retreat. All they had was their will to survive, their love for their planet, and the desperate hope that they could hold the line just a little longer. Cale's heart raced as he watched the human soldiers advance. He couldn't let them reach the heart. He couldn't let them have it. Every step the humans took toward the core of their world felt like a death sentence. His people would be enslaved, and their planet would be drained of everything that made it alive. The first shots rang out, a sharp staccato sound that echoed through the chamber. The Silurians fired their weapons with as much precision as they could muster, but their energy guns barely scratched the human soldiers' armor. The humans, undeterred, responded with blasts of their own. Quick, powerful, and precise. The Silurian fighters ducked behind pillars and debris, using the terrain as cover, but the humans were relentless. They advanced, pushing the Silurians back step by step. Lyra, standing beside Cale, fired her weapon, hitting one of the human soldiers in the shoulder. The soldier staggered but didn't fall. Another human fired back, hitting Lyra's arm. She winced in pain but didn't falter. Cale shouted for her to fall back, but she shook her head, determination blazing in her eyes. "We can't let them through, Cale. Not now. Not ever," she yelled, firing again. Despite the Silurians' best efforts, the humans were advancing with terrifying efficiency. They moved in a perfect formation, covering each other, their energy shields deflecting most of the Silurians' shots. The Silurians' weapons were no match for their technology. Cale gritted his teeth as the realization hit him. The battle was a losing one. Yet he refused to back down. He would not surrender his planet, not without a fight. "Keep fighting," Cale ordered, his voice firm. "We won't let them take the heart. We can't." But even as he shouted his orders, the humans were pushing closer and closer to the core. One by one, the Silurian soldiers fell. Some were taken down by direct fire, others by the sheer force of the humans' shock troops. Cale's heart sank as he saw the few remaining Silurian engineers huddled around the shield controls, working desperately to activate the last line of defense. The shield was their last hope, but it was only a matter of time before the humans would breach it. "They're almost here. Lara shouted as another volley of shots rang out, narrowly missing her. "Kel, we need to fall back." Kel's eyes darted toward the engineers. They were frantically working, but their movements were slowing. Sweat covered their brows as they fought to keep the shield from failing. Kel knew that if the humans reached them now, it would be over. "I won't abandon them," Kel yelled, gritting his teeth. "We hold the line." For Xyloria, a series of explosive blasts rang out, and the walls of the chamber shook violently. One of the human soldiers had deployed a grenade, blasting a hole in the side of the room. The Xylorians were momentarily stunned, but they quickly regained their composure and kept firing. They had no choice. Lyra was at Kel's side, her weapon overheating from the constant fire, but she didn't stop. "Kel, we're losing. The shield won't hold much longer." He turned to her, his face grim. "We'll keep them occupied. As long as we're standing, they can't reach the heart." The sound of the shield flickering and weakening echoed through the chamber. The engineers were shouting, their voices filled with fear. Kel knew they were almost out of time. "They're almost through." One of the engineers cried out, looking toward Kel in desperation. "We need more time." Kel's mind raced. Time. They needed more time to activate the shield fully, to keep the heart protected for just a little longer. He looked to Lyra, and she nodded, understanding his unspoken thoughts. They would make a final stand, even if it meant sacrificing themselves. "Lyra, stay with the engineers," Kel commanded. "I'll hold them off." She hesitated, her eyes filled with sorrow, but she understood. The Xylorians had never been warriors, but they would fight with every last ounce of strength they had. Kel moved forward, stepping between the advancing human soldiers and the engineers. He raised his weapon, aiming for the humans' weak points, trying to stop them in their tracks. His heart pounded in his chest, but his resolve was unshaken. He couldn't let them get to the heart. Not now. The humans, realizing his intention, started to focus their fire on him. It was clear they saw him as the last obstacle, the one who stood between them and their victory. Kel gritted his teeth and fired again, hitting one soldier square in the chest. He fell, but another took his place, and the relentless advance continued. Kel's vision blurred as the battle escalated. His heart raced with adrenaline. His thoughts focused solely on the task at hand, keeping the humans away from the heart. For his people, for Xyloria. Behind him, the engineers continued their work, their hands trembling as they pushed the final sequences of the shield into place. The chamber rumbled as the shield flickered one last time, but then suddenly it flared brightly, filling the room with a protective glow. The humans hesitated, surprised by the sudden surge of energy that surged through the chamber. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Kel turned to see the humans pause, momentarily stunned by the sudden defensive barrier. The shield was active. For now, they were safe. The heart of Xyloria was protected. But Kel knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The humans would not stop. They would try again. And next time, they might not be so lucky. Breathing heavily, Kel turned back to face the remaining Xylorians, who had fought with everything they had. They were battered, bloodied, and out of time. But they had succeeded, for now. "We've bought ourselves some time," Kel said, his voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "But this fight is far from over." The humans had come for Xyloria, and they would not give up easily. The Xylorians had won a small victory today, but it had come at a cost. The real battle, the one for their world, was far from over. As Kel and his people regrouped, they knew that the future of Xyloria depended on how long they could hold out against humanity's unstoppable force. And as the last of the human soldiers retreated, their eyes burning with hatred, Kel steeled himself for the war that was only just beginning. The silence in the heart's chamber was deafening. After the humans retreated, Kel allowed himself a moment to breathe. His heart still pounded in his chest, and his body ached from the relentless fighting. The Tylorian soldiers who remained in the chamber were battered but alive. They had done the impossible. They had held off the humans long enough to activate the shield, preserving the heart and their world. For now, Kale surveyed the room. His people, once so peaceful and full of hope, were now hardened by war. They had fought fiercely and with determination, but they all knew that the humans would return. This victory was temporary at best. The shield might hold for a while, but the humans were relentless. They had seen the heart's power, and they would stop at nothing to control it. Lyra approached Kale, her arm bandaged but her spirit unbroken. "We've bought ourselves time, Kale, but we need to prepare for what comes next. This isn't over." Kale nodded gravely. "I know, but we've done something we didn't think we could do. We've shown them that we won't go down without a fight. If we have to die protecting this planet, then we will." Lyra's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "We won't die, Kale. Not if we can help it. We'll find a way to turn the tide." But Kale knew the truth. The humans were far too powerful. Their fleet hovered just outside the atmosphere, and their soldiers were everywhere, taking control of key positions. Every moment they delayed was a blessing. But the reality was clear. The Xylorians were running out of time. The engineers continued to work feverishly on the heart's protective shield, making modifications to reinforce its power. It was their best chance, but even they knew it would not last indefinitely. "It's a temporary solution," one of them said, his voice trained. "We've managed to reinforce the shield, but we can only keep it up for a few days at most before the humans find a way to breach it." "We need more time," Kale muttered, his eyes scanning the chamber. "We need a plan, something that will force the humans to retreat." Lyra stepped forward. "Maybe there's another way. What if we turn the heart's power against them? If we can somehow harness its energy, we could strike at their ships in orbit. It would buy us time and might give the humans something to think about." Kale considered the idea. The heart was the source of all energy on Xyloria, and it was the reason their planet had flourished for centuries. If they could somehow harness its energy in a controlled burst, they could potentially disable the human ships, or at the very least, create a massive enough threat to force them into retreat. But it was risky, very risky. If they miscalculated, the heart could be destroyed, and the entire planet would be lost. "We have no other choice," Kale said. "We have to try, even if it means risking everything." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "We can do this. We have to." The group of Xylorian engineers worked through the night, calibrating the energy harnessing systems that would channel the heart's immense power. It was a delicate process. The heart wasn't just a power source. It was the lifeblood of Xyloria itself. To tamper with it could spell the end of their world. But Kel's mind was made up. They had no time left to waste. The humans would be back. And when they came, they would need to show them the full power of Xyloria. As the engineers worked, Kale and his small team of soldiers prepared to defend the heart's chamber. They had already seen what the humans were capable of, and they knew the next attack would be even more brutal. The humans would not make the mistake of underestimating them again. They would come for the heart with everything they had. Hours passed, and finally, the engineers gave the signal. The system was ready. The heart's energy was being channeled into the defense systems, and if Kel's plan worked, they would be able to send a powerful surge of energy to disrupt the human ships above. Kale turned to Lyra, who stood by his side. "Are you ready?" She nodded, her face steely with resolve. "Let's do this." The chamber rumbled as the energy systems activated, the heart glowing brighter than ever before. Kale felt a rush of power, the very essence of Xyloria's life force coursing through the chamber. The shield flickered, then surged to life again, stronger than ever. But as they prepared to launch the energy burst, an alarm blared. The humans had returned. Their ships descended through the atmosphere, their weapons primed. It was clear that they had no intention of retreating. The final assault had begun. Now or never. Kale shouted to the engineers. Fire the burst. The engineers hit the final switch, and in an instant, the heart's energy was channeled into a massive beam of light that shot up into the sky. The energy surged toward the human fleet, creating a blinding flash of light that filled the atmosphere. For a moment, everything went still. The beam of energy hit one of the human ships, causing it to lose power and begin spiraling out of control. The human fleet recoiled, their ships staggering from the unexpected attack. The Isolarians held their breath as the energy continued to surge through the atmosphere. But just as Cal thought they had won a momentary victory, something unexpected happened. The human ships regrouped, and a larger vessel, far more powerful than the others, emerged from the fleet. It hovered in place, undeterred by the attack. The humans had adapted. They had expected something like this. A voice crackled over the Silurian communication channels. It was the human commander. Silurians, the voice said coldly, you've shown that you are not as weak as we thought. But know this, we will not stop. This planet will be ours. Surrender now, and we will spare your people. Resist, and we will destroy everything. The transmission cut off, leaving Kale and his people with no illusions left. The humans had responded. They had adapted. They weren't going to stop until they had everything they wanted. Kale stood motionless, looking up at the ships above. His people had given everything they had to protect Tuxiloria. But it was clear now that the fight was far from over. The humans were relentless. They would stop at nothing to take what they wanted. And Siluria's fate rested in the hands of those who refused to surrender. The final battle for Siluria had only just begun.